just treating kids like they're buckets or vending machines. You put the money in and then they spit out information. Well, an education, shouldn't it be the cultivation of a human being?
Yes.
So that we can give them what they need now so that we can prepare them for a bright future. And so that's why I love homeschooling.
Well, hi and welcome to Practice Makes Parent, where we understand it's not about perfection, but about transformation. I'm Dr. Danny Huerta.
And I'm Rebecca St. James, and I'm so pumped
Excellent.
to be here.
Yes, we are live in Virginia at the Homeschool
Richmond.
Convention with live guests, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're alive, right?
Hi, guys.
Yes.
Can you make some noise?
All right.
Woo!
Yes.
They're here. So fun.
Isn't this great, Rebecca?
It sure
well, we have a
is.
wonderful guest.
We sure do.
Yeah, you wanna
Christy
introduce her?
Faith. I would
Yes.
love to. Christy, thank you so much for joining
Oh,
us.
I'm so happy to be here.
You are a rock star homeschool mom and advocate, and you have more than 2 decades of academic and administrative experience in homeschooling and education, from kindergarten to higher education. She co-founded an educational center and consulting firm in Los Angeles, which sounds very fancy to me, before transitioning to the homeschool arena, and we're so glad you're in that arena because we need these champions and advocates. She supports families in their homeschool journeys through her membership community, podcast, and social media. She lives in Colorado with her husband and 4 homeschooled children.
Colorado, that's beautiful.
Yeah, well, so do
yeah.
you.
Oh, Christy, woo, Colorado.
Denver, Colorado Springs.
You're a
That's
busy
right.
lady. Yeah.
You're like neighbors, you two,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah.
So we cannot wait to just get into your mind and heart and hear about your passion for homeschooling. Can you just share, Christy, right off the top, why are you so passionate about homeschooling? What was the story that engaged you so much in this passion?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned earlier, my husband and I founded a learning center and consulting firm in Los Angeles where our clients were A-listers and billionaires. We advised them on the educational choices for their kids. And we ran that for many, many years. We saw kids. I remember one child we had who started with us in 4th grade, and we worked with him all the way through USC. And so it wasn't like when I was a classroom teacher where I saw 1 year and then said goodbye to the student forever. We were able to witness, kind of be eyewitnesses of this progression of ultimately a childhood. And Scott and I, when we were thinking about starting our own family, we really started to question, okay, well, what do we want for our kids, right? These are people who can afford everything. You want a private football quarterback coach, you got it. You want the best tutor on the planet, it's Los Angeles, you got it. The best SAT tutors. We would do college counseling, we would get kids into Ivy League schools, and ultimately what we saw is we thought, hey, if you have absolutely everything at your fingertips, all the resources, these people had unlimited resources, why aren't the outcomes better? Why is depression still through the roof, anxiety, dangerous activities with teenagers? Why is there still failure to launch? Why, if you're paying gobs and gobs of money for a private elementary school, junior high, high school, can your kid still not think critically? They're still just trained to regurgitate answers. And we really started to question, what are we doing here? To the point where we asked ourselves, what is an education? So, okay, we have these children here. So what's an education? What should it be? And when I asked myself that question and started to seek for answers and seek truth, the answer caused us to never put our kids in the system. It actually led us to selling our company that was highly successful and moving across states to a more homeschool-friendly state where I could be a stay-at-home mom, right? Joke's on me now, because look, here I am traveling the nation speaking. But that's ultimately the story, is we were really disappointed with outcomes, and the kids weren't happy.
What do you think was broken about the system that you saw that homeschooling helped solve? What was the brokenness there?
Well, there is so much, but ultimately I think what really at least helped me in my own thinking is a childhood. One of the main reasons why I homeschool is I want to redeem childhood. So like I live in Denver, Colorado, right, where people will sacrifice their 401ks for travel teams and sports. And I just think that in our society, because we're so education focused and vocation focused and performance focused and sports focused and all the focuses, that we often are sacrificing our child's childhood on the altar of whatever it is that we dream for their future.
Yes.
When actually, to prepare kids for a bright future, we need to preserve this childhood and we need to give them what they need. Because ultimately, if we're giving our kids what they need now, both educationally and Danny, you can help with this psychologically, we have over 70 years of research regarding what kids actually need in a childhood. And newsflash, it's the system is actually working against what our kids actually really need. We don't want to graduate a bunch of broken kids, and that's what's happening right now in our system.
And Christy, it's complex though.
Yeah.
Because there are some really good schools.
Yeah.
There are amazing teachers.
Yes.
This is a big one. It's a big conversation for
Yeah.
families to have
Yes.
to decide to homeschool. Are we ready now? Is this the right time? And I know with kids I've worked with in my counseling practice, some personalities do very well with homeschooling and some don't. And some do very well in the public school system, some don't. And so it is one that you have to really pray through and seek wisdom. Now, I know California, they're having a tough time with education. And then if we look at Colorado, I mean, there's some issues there in Colorado that just things that are being taught, philosophies that are being taught. I think there are many teachers that are awakening to that. And so what I wonder is, how do we prepare our kids educationally well? But let's say they do go to school and they come back and then or let's say it's a hybrid type program. It's mainly homeschool, they're with another group. What is the role of a parent in helping guide our kids educationally, whether it's hybrid, whether it's full-time homeschooling? And I know right now our main topic is homeschooling, but I also don't want to shame people that are
No.
in that public school system. There are some kids that are a light there and thriving very well. But when you choose the homeschool side or the hybrid, what is that role for a parent as they're stepping in and let's equip the parent on that.
Yeah, well, first off, I don't think everybody can homeschool, and I don't think everybody should homeschool. There are a lot of reasons why a parent should not be homeschooling, right? Ultimately, I think that what we need to look at in terms of an education for our kids' future, right? Our kids, if your child is entering kindergarten right now, they are thinking that up to 85% of the jobs that they will have do not even exist yet because of the rise of AI. We're in the fifth industrial revolution. So all of us need to be asking, whether we are homeschooling or our kids are in private school or public school, how do we prepare our kids for a future that we can't even fathom yet? Employers are looking for more soft skills, communication. They're looking for highly emotionally intelligent people and entrepreneurial skills. Our schools are not doing that. So whether you are homeschooling or not, you can homeschool in a way where you're just redoing the system at home. You can buy curriculum that's just like the public school system. You can do that. You can homeschool in that way if you want. But what I like to shout from the rooftops is what an amazing opportunity homeschooling is, because we can actually look at what the skills our kids will need, kind of work backwards and prepare them for a job market that we can't even fathom. And if we don't know their job in the future, we got to then shift our focus to skills. Yeah.
You said something earlier that I thought was so interesting, that you're passionate about us as parents in this modern day world,
Yeah.
taking back the childhood of our
Yeah.
children, so that we're helping them to thrive in their childhood. What are the characteristics of a thriving childhood? How would you put words around that?
Well, I often talk about, and I'm not the first to use this term, and I think it's the most powerful term that we can use, is I really believe in the concept of greenhousing our children. So a lot of people accuse homeschoolers of sheltering our kids. I think that our society has confused school, which actually is forced association and age segregation, if I may be bold, and we have confused that with socialization. What our kids are experiencing in either public or private school is not actually healthy socialization. Now, us as Christian parents, can we do a lot with that and help our kids with that? Yes, there's a lot in our lives that we can't control, that we have to help our kids with and build their skills outside. I had a friend once tell me that the reason why she homeschools is because she can't undo what was done 7 hours in the day or on nights and weekends. And ultimately, we do have to ask ourselves as Christian parents, right? We're putting our kids into something 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, for up to 13 years straight that completely conflicts with our worldview, right? And we're the ones accused of indoctrination. It's kind of nuts. So, but in terms of your question, did I answer it?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, no,
mostly, but
Christy!
you totally did, and you gave me
Okay.
even more than my
Okay.
question. But what are words that characterize, like you said, nature? Like,
Yeah.
what are we claiming back that are characteristics of a claimed childhood, like a
Yeah.
thriving
Oh,
childhood?
yes,
Like
yes.
the
So-
joy and the beauty of that. Because I
Oh.
think we're all here. I'm a
Yeah,
homeschool mom.
okay, Yeah. yes.
I've got 3 kids, 11 and under. We're passionate about this. What is
Yes.
the joy of it? Like
Oh,
I
okay.
see the joy, I see the passion.
You can see it.
And it's just wonderful to put words around what we get to do.
Yes.
Like I'm getting goosebumps.
Thank you
just
for not letting me off the hook.
talking
Yeah.
about it.
Well, there's a lot of research on what children need. They need free play. They need purpose-driven work. So, like, they need to be volunteering. They need to feel important in their homes and outside of the homes. They need to
Chores.
know they can make a difference. They need downtime. And
Unstructured.
unstructured.
Yeah.
They need unstructured play, unstructured downtime. They need space to ponder their questions. And I think they need, secure attachment with their parents. And unfortunately, what has happened with, in terms of and Daniel, you can talk more about attachment theory and things
Yeah, we'll
like that.
talk about that in a
Yes,
moment. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so, it's fascinating to me. But ultimately, what tends to happen in our public school system and private when you are educating your child with groups of other children is they create this disorder called peer orientation. We have confused fitting in with socialization, right? And we know research on shame and belonging and all those things that fitting in is actually the opposite of belonging. You have to be somebody else to fit in. So when homeschool parents are kind of like, well, your kid's weird, your kid's not socialized. Well, of course our kids are gonna present differently. Our social lives are completely different than yours. Our kids are in age mixed environments. Our kids are not reading the same books. If you're a classically educated homeschool child, you're learning Latin starting in maybe 3rd grade. So why would you want us to look the same? It's kind of the point, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you get to customize what your
Yeah.
child needs.
Yes.
You get to know them.
Yeah.
And that's part of secure attachment, when a child feels known.
Yeah.
And that's part of belonging.
Yeah.
Right? To be known, to be understood by your peers, and to be a part of that. Now, with homeschooling, you get to save a lot of time,
Oh, man.
right? For extra
Yes.
things that you can do as a
Yes.
family, the skill building. Tell us about, Rebecca, tell us what you do, just the extra things you do with your kids.
I mean, we just recently, and I feel like homeschooling gave us a little bit of freedom to do this, but we did 2 camping nights in our backyard. And
Yeah.
there was like gathering the supplies and like setting up the tent. And, depending on the child, they were helpful or, not as helpful. Our 4-year-old wasn't doing a whole lot.
You're
But
teaching as you
yeah,
go.
oh, and they
Yeah.
were just experiencing how loud bullfrogs are outside. And I'd just been reading a homeschool book on nature and how we can really engage our kids
Yeah.
and spend more time outside. And I was just like, this is living. Like, this is so exciting to me. But we had more time for things like that. Or one of my kids is here on this trip right now. And I know it's summer, but she comes with me on lots of ministry trips because we homeschool. So there's this flexibility, and I don't know, I just see the creativity being engaged, and it's part of why I love this. Like, I just see them flourishing in their own unique giftings, and we have time to encourage those.
And Christy, what's fascinating on the secure attachment piece, and I think this is important for all homeschool families to understand, is that relationship requires time. It requires attention. And when you have the breakages where you're correcting a child, where you maybe as a parent just are imperfect and you lose it, you need time to be able to repair. That's what creates secure attachment. You know that you can disagree, you can have conflict, you can have moments that are difficult, and there's still love, there's still connectedness. That's what you get to build. Otherwise, you're in a hurry, you go to the next thing, and then you miss those moments of building secure attachment. And then what you end up building is a much more anxious type of attachment. And the anxious attachment is a very common one that is out there. And that is, I'm going to do whatever I can to have you stay with me. And if you don't stay with me, there's something wrong with me. And there's such an anxiousness to that. And we're seeing that through social media and other places. And so I love the fact that you brought in secure attachment to this. That's an important foundation to the home. Yeah.
You can not have a secure attachment and be a homeschool parent, right? It's really, and you can have a secure attachment with your kids, and you can have your kids in public or private school as well.
It's taking the time.
It's
and
it's intentionality, and
Right.
at least for me, it's working on my own stuff, right?
That's
It's knowing when I'm dysregulated that's when I can cause problems.
So one of the big things that you guys began to talk about is inquisitiveness that we can foster in our kids. Let's talk about that. How do we draw that out, given that they have different personalities and different ways of learning? What does that look like, Christy?
Well, what we do know is that intrinsic motivation, which is what we all want for our children and ourselves, actually. We want to be intrinsically motivated, not extrinsically motivated, right? We don't want the gold stars, the stickers. We know this is not real motivation. What we all want for our kids is we want them to love learning, right? Well, we know that this happens through allowing our kids space and to be interest-led. So a great way that I like to explain this, and I think homeschooling is just a beautiful way for this to happen naturally in our homeschool days, is interest-led learning. Asking our kids questions. But our kids need to read. Our kids need computation skills, right? But there is also so much amazing freedom in the things that we can allow to be interest-led.
Yes.
And you know what? Our kids need skills more than they need to know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. They need frustration tolerance. They need emotional regulation. They need those communication skills so much more than just regurgitation. And that takes hours during the school day to homeschool that way or to school that way, just treating kids like they're buckets or vending machines. You put the money in and then they spit out information. Well, an education, shouldn't it be the cultivation of a human being?
Yes.
So that we can give them what they need now so that we can prepare them for a bright future. And so that's why I love homeschooling. So we are in the high school years for homeschooling, and I have never loved homeschooling more because we have the time to look at internships, all sorts of different things that we wouldn't have time for if my children were in traditional school setting 7 hours a day. We can,
Those are great.
yeah,
The
and it's
internships
really,
are
really, and
fantastic.
that's going to really help them in terms of the setting them up for a bright future, have an idea of their skills, what their interests are, find out what they don't want to do, right? And you know what? This is what, when you think about what future employers are going to want, or if they're
Yes.
going to be future entrepreneurs, do they want a cookie cutter? Do they want someone who's learned all the same things? Because we can't possibly learn everything before we're at the age of 18. We kind of have to pick and choose. So why let the system pick and choose for us when it's antiquated anyway? Why don't we pick it?
Yeah, you're creating a love of learning.
Yeah.
That dopamine rush in the brain of
Yes.
just being able to remember or be motivated, learn how to learn, right? Yeah.
And I love that the market research is now saying that this is what
Yes.
leaders want,
Yes.
and this is
Yes.
why the kind of employees that they're looking for, that have this emotional intelligence, that have initiative, that have problem-solving skills. I want to read this stat because I think it's really interesting. Pre-COVID, the homeschooling households in the U.S. was about 3.23%, 2.6 million children. The year end of 2021, that number increased to 11.1%. So, I mean, that is amazing that in just such a short amount of time, so many more people are homeschooling.
And you know, Rebecca, I've gotten to travel to the different conventions, and you can continually see growth there. And it's so life-giving to be at these conventions. Just so many amazing families that are intentionally involved in their families, their kids, their marriages. It's beautiful to see how it continues to grow. And there's a reason why. Let's talk about that. We started to talk about just the education system and why, but also the overall benefits to it. We're talking about the employer. Any other benefits that we would see to just encourage that listener to say, man, I don't know. Do I take this leap? Let's help them on why homeschooling would be a good decision and potentially a sacrificial decision. I've heard of people giving up being doctors or other things, careers, in order to do that, or putting them on hold to do it. What are your thoughts, Christy?
We do know there's 87% of peer-reviewed studies that show that homeschooled children perform better socially, psychologically, and emotionally over their schooled peers, public and private, actually. There are also other studies that show the unhappiness of kids who are in school, the amount of stress, cyberbullying, the amount of, you can go to Nation's report card, which is not even a homeschooling website, and look at the statistics. About half of fourth grade kids in our country are not reading proficiently. So it humors me when people come up to me and say, well, who's making sure you're on track, Christy? I'm like, okay, so the same system that's failing half of the fourth graders in our country, thank you very much, right? And then they want to continue to regulate homeschoolers to try to make us look more like the system when we just want to be over here giving our kids what they want. I love that you mentioned sacrifice earlier, because people often say, well, you're privileged. You can homeschool because you're privileged. It absolutely is a privilege, and there needs to be an and it's an incredible sacrifice, right? Because I can't tell you how many of us, the average annual income for homeschooling families is less because we are giving up a lot of us are giving up the dual income. A lot of the moms in my community, they can't take a full-time job, so they're doing side hustles and things like that, and like a gig economy, freelancing, things like that, so that they can continue to homeschool. So we are making incredible sacrifices, including the clean house.
That's right. That's the reality, if people are going to be honest.
Yeah.
I think there's this longing for something different for our kids, and a lot of people, and these statistics show that. But I think in some people's mind, and maybe this is some people listening right now, there's still a little bit of a negative, maybe leftover mentality, maybe from some of our childhoods when homeschooling was very different. Can you just undo some of those myths about homeschooling?
I would love to. Yes, so if you're wondering, the official term for this is deschooling. Deschooling, not to be confused with unschooling.
Right. Can you define actually both
yes,
before
yeah,
you?
Yeah, yeah. So unschooling is one of the homeschool pedagogies. There are 9 homeschooling pedagogies. You know some of them: Montessori, Waldorf, classical education, Charlotte Mason. There's 9. And unschooling is one of those pedagogies popularized by researchers like Peter Gray, which is basically kind of like I'm not going to do it justice right now, but for time's sake, it's more of a completely interest-led learning lifestyle, because there is research that shows that interest-led learning is quite motivating, and it is. Intrinsically, it is motivating. Deschooling is a completely different term, and that has to do with kind of undoing in our minds, because most of us were raised in the system ourselves. I know you were homeschooled, so maybe
partially, a bit of both.
Okay,
yeah,
yeah, where it's very hard for us when we transition to homeschooling to think, wait, no grades. Wait, I can't measure this? Wait a minute, don't we need a math test? Don't we need a spelling test at the end of the week? How are they gonna know if my kid's on track? How am I gonna know if my kid's on track? Am I doing this right? Because here's the thing, when you start deschooling yourself, you start to realize that the things that really matter are hard to measure empirically. And that can only be measured really through relationship. When we look at the skills that really matter in terms of raising our kids to be successful and happy human beings. So that's a difference between those two terms in particular. And for mamas on the fence, let's get out of this mindset of like, are they on track? Do I check the boxes? Do I download the states and standards, right? All of those standards, and make sure I'm following those. Because it's really hard, because when we homeschool, we are leaving that because we know it doesn't work, and our hearts are telling us it doesn't work, but we go over here and then we're told, all right, go build a custom house. And we're like, but I don't know how. I'm not a contractor. I'm not this. I wasn't a teacher. I wasn't trained how to do this. And so this is why there's all that self-doubt and insecurity. But the thing is that we can actually really do it better. Because listen and hear me out. If you hear nothing else, I want you to hear this. 150 years ago, a bunch of guys did not sit around a boardroom table and think to themselves when they were creating the compulsory school system in America. They were not thinking, what's best for kids? And it was based on zero research. It was what is best for the state. It was not created for the best interest of your child in the first place. And there's no better place to educate a child than in a loving home with a motivated parent, because we can give our kids, yes, that solid foundational education, and we can foster and nurture their gifts and their strengths. And in half the time. So it's just a really beautiful, cool thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the tricky part is the whole, I would say, the organization piece.
Yes.
You alluded to that.
Yeah.
And there are parents that I've talked to that are pretty insecure about that. They don't want other people to know, man, our home, it is a mess.
Yes.
I'm just not organized, and their personality is just not naturally organized.
Talking about
Let's
that,
talk about that a bit.
your wife is here,
Yes,
and
she
we
is.
were setting up the focus booth here a little bit earlier. Anyway, she and I were chatting, and she's like, "Yeah, I don't know that we could have homeschooled. Like, just like our household, sometimes the
Yeah,
order." She
she-
was like confessionally
she-
with a
she was,
laugh
yeah,
saying
yeah.
this. Like that would have
Yeah.
been challenging
It'd been
for us.
overwhelming probably for
Yeah.
her. Yeah.
But I think that is a barrier to kind of talk to, with homeschooling. You don't have to, I mean, I think you do have to have order and some structure, and she and I were just talking about that.
But if she was right here, I would really encourage the mom that feels that way.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Yeah.
You really can. And initially, it can feel completely overwhelming. And we had a fantastic school close by. It was a classical education, Christian teachers. We knew many of them, and we did the hybrid homeschooling thing, and she did great. It's just that thing where you're self-critical.
Yes.
And I just want to encourage her. I wish she was in here. That she'd be able to do it.
Oh,
Totally.
I 100%
And I
believe
just,
it. Your wife's
a lot of
amazing.
moms, really in particular, are hard on themselves.
Yes,
That
we
it needs to
are,
be
all of us.
perfect, and it's not going to be perfect. It
No.
really isn't. But what you're doing is you're being intentional. You're pouring into your kids, and you're creating a real difference in there. And there's, when I've seen homeschool parents do it well, they go towards the relationship first. They create a warm environment of learning, and then they go towards all the tasks. If you're focused on all the tasks, you start to miss out on the warmth that you can create in the home. And it's so important to get those in the right order. You don't have to be perfect. You're not performing. You're not trying to get an A or a B. You're not being graded as a parent. You are giving a gift of everything you've got for your kids, and that
It's a
is a
relationship,
beautiful gift.
right?
Yeah.
That's what I hear you
So I
saying.
wish she could be here if she
Yeah.
said that.
Oh,
Yeah, I
know.
think she would have done great.
Yeah, she would have.
One of the big things that I just want to leave parents. Actually, you didn't get to answer that one. As far as just being organized, what do you think?
Oh,
is
yeah.
Just
Speak
a
to
couple
it.
hacks?
She's busting. Look
Yeah,
at
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I like
Yeah.
a tidy house. So I am dysregulated with visual clutter, right? My husband just went, mm-hmm. So
Yes.
when you are not homeschooling, something that's really hard to wrap your brain around is that it's not like there's school hours and then you're sitting there in front of a whiteboard, and then the whole house goes crazy. It actually is real life. Like you're doing real life with your kids. So I can tell you how I do it.
Yes.
It was really hard when my kids were young because I had twins and then a baby 7 months. I got pregnant with my last one 7 months when my twins were 7 months old. Wow. So I basically had 3 babies and I was homeschooling my oldest. So that was crazy. That was and he traveled every week because we hadn't sold the company yet. But that was wild. But I just kept telling myself, this is a season.
Yes.
This is a season. So what I will say is that we have a homeschool schedule. So one thing that I think has been a disservice, if you go on social media and you see these, ethereal videos with these moms in the flowy dresses with banana bread and her kids just frolicking in the field, and she's like, we homeschool. Look, here are the measuring cups. That's fractions. If I'm told that a measuring cup is fractions one more time, okay, yes, a measuring cup is fractions, and so is a pie. But let's go beyond that because that's not real life, okay? Real homeschooling is messy, and kids actually thrive under structure. Kids are very anxious, and you know this too. Kids are very anxious when there isn't something that they can rely on, a solid structure. It does not need to be rigid. They just need to know what to expect out of their day, their week, out of you, right? That's why our own emotional regulation is so important too as parents. But what I can tell you what we do is in our homeschool schedule, there is a lot of margin. So for example, if a subject takes us 40 minutes, it's a 50-minute on the schedule, right? So there's always time for transitions, the peanut butter spoon, right? The fighting over the pencil. There's always time for that. And then we also write in the schedule our chores, or is the cleanup time. So I'm a big believer in habit stacking. So whenever there is a meal, there is immediate cleanup, and all the children know exactly what they are supposed to do after those meals. And I'm the type of person where we keep our chores for an entire calendar year. So I'm not constantly training on chores. So there are ways to, and there's always that storming phase, right? When everything feels overwhelming. Think about the first time when you were learning how to drive a car. You thought of everything. You were looking in the mirrors, you were this, you were that, and everything was stressful. I bet you last week you drove to the grocery store and didn't even know how you got there. Homeschooling is just like that. You think of everything in the beginning, how am I gonna do that? It's all overwhelming. And then you realize, okay, this can just be in a regular routine, in a schedule, and it really can run at a pretty steady clip. I was a teacher, you guys. It's messy there too, right? I can't tell you how many days were just completely wasted and no learning ever happened, right? It was just crowd control. So just have grace with yourself and know that you're doing a better job than you think.
All that you've shared has been so helpful. We're going to transition into a Q&A time with our audience members here in a few minutes. But Christy, we had a question from a listener that we wanted to get to, that we want to invite you into as well and get your thoughts on it. So here's this question from Tracy. She says, "Dear Danny and Rebecca, we need parenting advice. Our family moved from a large farm to the suburbs recently, and we have a lifestyle that is different from most families. Although our kids go to public school, we don't do sports and we don't do video gaming. Our kids have limited screen time as well. They aren't crying out for these things, but they've mentioned that they feel left out sometimes when they are interacting with their peers. Are we doing the right thing? We know playing sports teaches a lot of life lessons, but should we alter our parenting to be more flexible and adapt to today's parenting styles? And will this affect them negatively as they move into adulthood? Thanks for your show." And I like to get to the expert opinion, so I'm just going to get my little thoughts out of the way. But
What a good question. Yeah, I like it.
Wonderful question. Thank you so much, Tracy. I feel like, and my husband does as well, that we don't get this time back with our kids, and so the family culture that we sense from the Lord is important, and the family ideals that we value. We need to stick to those things, even when seasons change. And obviously, I think for us, speaking to the why with our children that are growing older, especially our 11-year-old, and kind of just speaking to, our family does things differently, but here's the why. Here's how it benefits you and benefits your heart, and inviting them into that conversation, but speaking to it instead of just going, our family does it differently, and this is how it's going to be, just deal with it. But speaking that why regularly we're going to be different, and that's okay, but here's the why, and it benefits you. What would you guys, the experts?
Christy, you go
first.
first. Go ahead,
What would you
Christy.
say?
Yeah.
Well, from a homeschooling perspective, she sounds like a homeschooler, actually.
She does.
Yes, very much with that mindset. So this is what is concerning to me, and I see this great divide, especially as my kids are getting older, because we participate in sports with public school kids. We have friendship groups. We live on a big cul-de-sac. We're the only homeschoolers on that cul-de-sac. It really is alarming to me, this divide between faith-based Christian parenting and kind of what our culture is considering parenting, with heavy screen time, that type of environment. And this is a challenge for me, because a lot of the conversations in our home are helping our children navigate relationships with public school kids, because their culture is just so different than ours. The parenting decisions are different. So, for example, we are a family that doesn't do sleepovers. Well, guess what? Everyone on our cul-de-sac does a sleepaway camp every year, and we know the week, and our kids aren't there, right? Rebecca, that was so encouraging. We sit them down, and we remind them why. And so I think that there is, right, we are in the world but not of this world. There is a level of acceptance that we can build resilience and strength and help our children, tell them why. Will they understand it? Will a 13-year-old kid understand it right this second? Maybe not, maybe. But will they probably understand it when they're 30?
Yeah.
My guess is yes, especially if you have that secure attachment and you're sharing with them. So my hunch, because I am a homeschooler, is don't change what you're doing. She sounds like an amazing parent,
She does.
right?
Yeah.
And so, but I want to hear your perspective.
Yeah, and you talked about structure, and structure's so important, and especially around screens. I mean, we have to realize that it was created to be addictive, and our brains, everyone, if people say, they're not prone to addiction. We are. Our brains are created to, we have dopamine, we have all the receptors that everyone else has. Now, there are genetics that create more of a propensity to it. On video gaming, I think there's a softness sometimes towards that, or screen time, where there's an anxiety, that anxious attachment of needing to be liked by your kids. And so, Tracy, what I'd say here is that you are putting the structure you think is necessary. The big question here is this going to affect them negatively? I see a tremendous benefit in organized sports, in being part of a team. And so you do need to think through, is a structure outside of our home based off of fear, or is it based off of what is best for each of the kids? Because there could be some kids that may not be able to handle some of the things, or haven't matured to be able to handle it. And then there may be some that are tremendous leaders and could be great athletes. And in that, they can actually become captains and very life-giving in the world around them. And I've seen so many young men and women gain a tremendous amount of self-confidence and skill sets around coaches that are super, super life-giving and are passionate about coaching. And I've also seen some kids destroyed in their psychology and in their social confidence by coaches and by other players. And so you want to carefully consider where they could potentially be putting their time and effort, because sports do require a tremendous, tremendous amount of time and energy. And as a family, you have to figure out what sacrifices you're making to participate in that. I remember my son asking, am I going to play in a year-round club team? And I said, let's weigh the costs of what that's going to be to our family and also just financially, with the fact that most likely you're not going to be a professional. And that wasn't to crush his dreams, but the percentage is so small. And I said, here are the pros and cons for our family and then financially. And he's the one that said, yeah, Dad, I love the sport. I'd love to continue to play, but a year-round thing would just not make sense. And we talked about it as a family. And I said, yeah, I agree completely. That it doesn't make sense to sacrifice that much, but let's keep playing. And with sports, as a parent, you can be involved with your kids as well. Participate, volunteer on the team as a helper with the team. You can get a feel for what is happening there. Some things happen in locker rooms and sidelines that you'd want to make sure you're aware of. So, it's a good question. And sometimes we think we have to say an absolute no or an absolute yes. And it's more complex than that. And we need to understand our child, each of our children, their differences, and also understand the environment well. But I love the fact that this question came in. Please continue to send your questions.
Yes.
We love that you do, and we do our best to answer them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we are going to move to our Q&A here. So if you have a question, please do come to our table up here. We've got a signed book from Danny and a signed book from me for our first person that comes up there. Thank you so much for being the brave first person.
Of course, and thank you guys for putting this on. This has been wonderful, so grounding and really fulfilling. But my biggest question, I have 4 children, ages 10 to 4, and my oldest was in the system for quite a while. So how do we best support untraining that, what he had being in the system, and myself, trying to get out of that mindset of the school and all of that?
Christy, sounds like a perfect question for you.
Yes. So, and you're brand new?
This would be our second year, yes.
Okay.
So basically brand new.
Yeah. So I actually have a tool, because we needed a pathway for moms like you, because you're not alone. And so one of the things I tell you guys to do is I have a free 5-minute homeschool style finder on my website. And it takes only 5 minutes to take, and it tells you which of those 9 pedagogies you lean more towards, meaning what you want for your family. And then once that pops up and that tells you, and it's been around several years now and it's pretty accurate, then we can have the conversation about reading up on those pedagogies, that what particular pedagogy came out first. Because here's the thing for those who are new to homeschooling. So we're at a convention right now, and there's a massive convention hall, and there's so much curriculum being sold, and you're thinking, okay, what's good? I can guarantee you at my Homeschool 101 that I'm giving in about a half an hour here, those moms are sitting there, and what they want is, Christy, just tell me what to buy, right? And I can't tell you what to buy because there's 9 different pedagogies. And I don't know if you're Charlotte Mason, if you want to be classical, and all are great. But here's what you do need to know is that each of those curricula options down there in the convention hall, they all lean towards one or two of those pedagogies. So just knowing kind of your own style can eliminate 80% of what's on the market and help you. And then we can talk later too, because there's books I can recommend for you in those pedagogies. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes.
There's also a lot of like homeschool kind of coaches that can coach you
Yes.
through it too,
Yeah.
that you can find, and
Yes.
that could be a wonderful resource. If you don't know somebody in your local area, online you can reach out for homeschool coaching too. But you're not alone. There's a
No,
lot of support.
no.
There's more support
Yes.
than there has ever been right now.
Yes.
And you're in the right place, right, this
Yeah.
convention?
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Ask a lot of questions.
Yes.
Yeah. Good job,
you.
Mama.
Thank you.
We have one other question as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, you guys, for engaging in this important part.
So I have a question, mostly I think for probably Christy, some background here in Virginia in the last year, we have, well, one compulsory attendance laws in Virginia, but we also have the religious freedom from school. That came under threat this past year with mostly a kind of a target towards requiring aptitude testing or achievement testing for even religiously exempt children in the state of Virginia. My background is I'm a pediatrician, but my wife stays at home and homeschools our children. What resources do you have, or I guess, what advice would you give us in terms of being a pediatrician and encountering children every day, giving advice on their upbringing and their progress in school, and how important that is to create that foundation that they go into the world with, but then still kind of wanting to mend that to reflect the lack of structure there in a system that we kind of know is broken, and then having them be able to go into the future well prepared, but not having that, I guess, structure to the homeschool that, I guess, sticking to that curriculum really gives you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I heard a lot of questions in there, and I'm excited about every single one of them.
I had too many.
So number one is I am thrilled to meet a pediatrician that homeschools
Yes.
because
Isn't that awesome?
yay,
Yeah, I love it. Love it.
because I wish that more pediatricians in America gave homeschooling as an equal option. Also, when children are diagnosed with special needs, often it's the pediatrician that is telling the parent that the parent is not qualified to teach their child with whatever particular diagnosis is the case. I've read thousands of IEPs. We have worked with children with every diagnosis under the sun. I would spend my days with psychologists, admissions counselors, school principals, you name it. So I think number one is just exciting to hear that this can be presented as an equal option, and the resources are as such today that it really does not, your qualifications do not matter. The resources are phenomenal. We do combination of self-paced courses, I love foreign languages being live online classes where my kids are on Zoom calls with kids from all over the world.
Wow.
And they're going in breakout rooms and speaking Latin and things like that. And then in terms of your question about the freedoms, that was another one.
Well,
Right?
I guess with my mindset of being a pediatrician and being forced to kind of always encounter what progress are they making on a yearly basis and things like that, if we want to get away from that system that we know is not working in today's society to produce a well-rounded person that has skills that future employers are looking for, or to become a future employer, how do we know that we're keeping track and progress with kind of meeting those goals if we're not doing the achievement tests, if we don't, stick on a daily basis to a fixed curriculum to know that we're going to end up at that point in the future with the child prepared to go into that workforce?
So in a lot of states, homeschoolers are required to test our children with the standardized tests that nationwide other children take as well. I live in Colorado. It's required every other year, and I give them a standardized test. This is the cool thing about homeschooling, which is so encouraging to me. Because our focus has been on literacy, critical thinking, and things like that, our kids outscore, homeschooling kids outscore traditionally schooled kids, both public and private, by 15 to 30%. And these are homeschooling moms who are not following the traditional pedagogy. These are moms who have been, interest-led schooling, classical schooling. I think I have a theory as to why. Because we have, generally homeschoolers approach education in more of a, even if don't call yourself classical, you probably have more of a classical pedagogy where you want your children to be reading the great books, to be highly literate, to be discussing, having Socratic discussions in your home. Yeah. I know that math is a very important skill cognitively, right? Not just math. Our kids need to know algebra because of their brain development, not just knowing algebra or the Pythagorean theorem that they'll never use again. They actually will use it again because it's growing their cognition. So my answer is I don't think homeschoolers really need to worry because we're already outpacing and have been. But that causes a lot of anxiety, and I know on how do you track. This is why you have and this is probably why you asked that question, this is why you have states trying to regulate us.
I mean, I would just say, I appreciate the question.
Yes, yeah.
Really, because it's important to know if our kids are on track.
Yes.
And so, Christy, as you answered that, with each of the states, there are resources to be able to measure that on the homeschool side.
You can assess as much as you want. There's so many different, places where you can have your child assessed, to make you feel at home and at peace that they're staying on track.
The wonderful thing with the homeschool side is you can begin to learn what their bend is and where they're headed. And the more they get to learn within that passion and that bend that you guys are able to do in your home, the faster you'll see the learning and the capturing in the brain. It'll develop at an amazing rate. And that's the advantage on the homeschool side instead of the public side. The public school side has been trying to do that, but you can do it so much better in the home. But do test. It is good, not only for you guys, but also the child. Most kids want to know, am I doing okay?
Right.
Well, you're a part of the family here at Practice Makes Parent. Our community is growing, and thanks to you, you guys are a part of this community. Thanks for joining us here live. Keep sharing with your friends about Practice Makes Parent. Please invite them. We love to have a community of parents that are encouraging each other and also asking questions.
Mm-hmm. And next week, we'll continue to share more from the Virginia Homeschool Conference, and we'll be hearing from Lisa Jo Baker. It's going to be a wonderful conversation. She's going to share her story of growing up with an abusive father and how she broke the cycle of reactive anger and having an explosive temper, and how she's not passing that on generationally, how to break some of those generational habits that we have seen in our childhood.
Oh man, I'm not going to miss that one. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's important to hear testimonies like that. So we hope you'll tune into that one. I'm Dr. Danny Huerta.
And I'm Rebecca St. James. Join us next time for more tips for transforming your parenting on Practice Makes Parent.